Hello again, I am Blunty, and this is the Lumix S5, my own brand new workhorse. And that right there is a modern lens legend, and a wildly popular YouTuber's choice lens, the Sigma 18-35 f1.8. It was one of Sigma's first art series lenses when that branding first launched, and I was actually lucky enough to be one of the first YouTubers to review that beastie all those years ago, and man did I love it. It is just exquisite in so many ways. But it has been many years since I've last used it properly. See, it's a Canon EFS mount lens and designed for a DSLR, and I moved away from shooting with DSLR cameras very early on at the start of the mirrorless revolution. And quite frankly, it's a bit big and heavy and awkward on most of the small Micro Four Thirds cameras bodies I had at the time, except for the unusually chunky GH5 once I got that. But by the time I did get that body, I had native lenses that were roughly equivalent in focal length and speed, which were much smaller and lighter and easier to travel with, so I tended to use those instead. But obviously, I still have the lens because I'll be damned if I was going to part with the Sigma. It's a friggin' classic. And I just knew if I got rid of it, I would regret it. And I would have today, because in this video, I'll be showing you some low-light video and photography using it adapted to my Lumix S5 via a relatively inexpensive smart adapter from Fotodiox. And for those of you who've never come across the term before, when I say smart adapter, I mean it enables full and complete electronic control over the adapted lenses. So, metadata works. Aperture control works, autofocus works, and if your lens has it, even the inbuilt lens stabilization will work. This is in contrast to what we could call a dumb adapter, which only mechanically adapts one lens to a different camera body. And those don't have any electronic control at all. Quite nice for older manual lenses, but useless for most modern lenses. Like I said, this is the smart type. It's unusually nicely packaged for this kind of thing too, padded wooden box and all. And protective caps that look a bit like Oreo cookies. I like those. And if you are curious about using older manual lenses through a dumb adapter, please make sure you're subscribed and belled because I did get one of those too, and I will be testing that out as well. So, as we have a look at what this lens can do on the S5 with the help of the Fotodiox adapter, and then I'll report back to you on how the adapter works and if it's worth your money, let's roll back a bit in the story. There's many things I loved about working with the Micro Four Thirds cameras. It's why I transitioned away from working with DSLRs much earlier than most people did. But one of the funner reasons was down to its sensor size and lens flange distance arrangement, making it one of the most flexible mounting systems on the planet when it comes to adapting all kinds of different fun lenses. Everything from modern DSLR lenses, kooky little C-mount lenses from security cameras and old 16mm film cameras, all the way back to 60-plus-year-old classic rangefinder glass and a lot of different kinds of lenses in between. But now comes the Lumix S series, and the S5 in particular here, a camera I've been waiting for a long time. And the S5 is in fact a camera many have shorthand described as a full-frame GH5. And in quite a lot of ways, it's very much that, which is a fantastic thing. It is extremely powerful for video creators, and despite having a sensor twice the size of the GH5s, the camera body itself is actually slightly smaller. The Lumix S5 uses a lens mounting system called the L mount, which started with the Leica's first steps into mirrorless digital cameras. That's what the L stands for. But now it is a full-fledged multi-brand alliance, a partnership between Leica and Sigma and Panasonic. And a similar alliance is one of the things I like about the Micro Four Third cameras too. You're not just trapped within one brand's ecosystem. It's a whole bunch of brands working together. But the L mount has a very short flange distance combined with a full frame sensor, so it's not nearly as adaptable to wacky old lenses as Micro Four Thirds is. But that's not to say there aren't options, because there are. Quite a few, actually. I've already set myself up with adapters that either alone or in combination with each other will let me use my old Canon EF glass, a couple of old Pentax DSLR lenses, my old Soviet-era L39 screw-mount rangefinder lenses from 6 decades past, and there's some other options too that I don't yet have adapters for, or don't have the lens type for anyway. But while there is still some fun options for this camera, in more practical terms, it's this adapter that's most useful, to me anyway. Between using it with this classic Sigma and a couple of other Canon EF mount fast prime lenses I kept hold of, it's really nice to be off the ground and up and running immediately with some options aside from the kit lens I already have for the S5. There's compromises, of course, one big one with the Sigma I'll come to in a moment, but mostly it's the fact that the autofocus is significantly slower than a native lens would be. So that limits it a little in utility in certain workflows and situations. Sports photography and wildlife photography in particular would be less than ideal with focus speeds this speed. But slower, more deliberate types of work will be largely unaffected, really. And the fact that the adapter doesn't currently support continuous autofocus, the Fotodiox people say they're working on a firmware upgrade to provide this function. That's what that little USB port was for, if you spotted that earlier in the video. And it's really nice to have a smart adapter that can be firmware updated, so if there ever is a problem with a lens sometime in the future, they can patch in a fix. But that said, given how autofocus currently works, I'm not convinced it'll be very practical in continuous autofocus when that does eventually work. And it'll still be nice to have in the back pocket as an option. And as for the other limitation of this Sigma lens in particular that I mentioned, well, let's pop into the field and I'll tell you all about it.
In my top 10 reasons this is the best camera video, I made a joke about forgetting to charge my wireless microphone as a little lead in to being able to talk about the on-camera microphones and how the camera handles the audio in general. Well, I don't know whether you can tell, but I'm using the on-camera mics right now because I genuinely did forget to charge my wireless mics overnight for this. So, at its widest end, this lens is 18mm, which is wider still than the unusually wide kit lens with the S5, which I praised for being wide and therefore very, very useful. But there's a catch, because the Sigma is also a lens designed for cropped sensor cameras. Designed for APS-C cameras. I used to use it with my Canon 60D and my Canon 70D, and it worked brilliantly on those, but of course the S5 is a full frame camera. Fortunately, it does have a little mode you can drop into a crop sensor format for video and just pretend it never happened. And I've actually got that mode selection set up on a shortcut key on the back of my camera because it is useful to be able to go into APS-C or pixel by pixel mode sometimes. Even when you're not using crop sensor lens, sometimes you just gets you a little punch in, gets you a little extra telephoto sometimes. It's very useful to have on the back of the camera, but using it with this lens is kind of essential. You can use this lens in full frame mode, but in stills mode, it'll give you quite a severe vignetting because stills is slightly wider again than video because you're not dealing with a 16:9 crop, for example. And you can even use it in video mode. Let me show you what that's about. And here you are. This is in full frame mode on this camera. I'm cheating a little bit because I'm shooting at night here, so you can't quite see the vignetting at the corners up there because they're dark anyway. You might be able to see a little bit. Maybe I have to move my hands down the corner of the screen so you can see it just a little bit there. And if you zoom into about 24mm from the 18, the vignetting essentially disappears in video mode, and you'll need to go to about 28mm on the lens in stills mode to sort of push past that crop as well. Now, stills mode doesn't do the APS-C cropping because it doesn't need to. You're dealing with stills, you can easily crop those in post. It just shoots in full frame by default. And in various focal lengths, that sort of vignetting you get from using a crop sensor lens on a full frame can actually look quite pleasant. It gives you a very particular look, a sort of a faux vintage look. So sometimes you can take advantage of that and use it to your advantage. Instead of being an image floor, all of a sudden it's a sort of built-in vignette to sort of give you that sort of soft circular kind of framing and pull your eye into the center of the frame a bit more, so you can use it in creative ways. And of course the other way to go in video mode is just to keep shooting in full frame and crop in post. It's a little bit more fiddly to do it that way, but it does give you more control because you can crop exactly how much you want out of a 4K frame if you're going to a 1080p timeline. And the vignetting is such you can crop in just enough to get rid of it so most people won't notice it, and you'll still wind up with a slightly wider frame than you would have in the default in-camera APS-C crop mode.
So, the adapter itself works great. Mechanically, it feels very well made. Solid, and the fit and finish is tight and robust. It feels really nicely engineered, actually. There's no wiggle or slop in the camera or lens fittings. It snaps on really tightly and really confidently. The electronics work perfectly. No issues with any of the 3 Canon lenses I've tried so far, one being this Sigma lens, one is a native Canon Prime, and the other a cheapo Chinese Nifty 50. So between those 3, official Canon, well-respected third party, and cheapo Chinese, I feel pretty confident that this will work with pretty much anything you want to throw on there. So yeah, I can happily recommend this adapter for you new Lumix full frame users who, like me, may have held on to their Canon DSLR glass over the years. It works great on the S5, which of course should mean it'll work just as good on the Big Brother S models too, if you've gone that route. I've had a few different adapters and such from this brand over the years. I think this is the first smart adapter I've had from them though, and it's been a pretty consistent experience in their build quality for even the dumb adapters. I don't know much about their customer service though, but that's because I've never had a problem with any of their products, so that's probably a good thing. And the Sigma behaves close to how it does on a native body. The only real exception is that focus speed. But image-wise, it's everything I remember it being, and that's what I care about. I mean, the Lumix S5 has an amazingly good kit lens, and it covers a wider focal length, and is smaller, and is lighter, and balances on the camera better, but it's also slower. Much slower, and it's not a consistent aperture either, which certainly can be an issue for certain kinds of shooting, particularly in video. So it is very pleasing to be able to move the Sigma 18-35 f1.8 from my storage into active rotation and proper use once more. It's got a beautiful look, buttery bokeh, and a consistent and bright f1.8 all the way through its range. It will make a very useful lens in my S5's arsenal. And thank you very much for watching. I am Blunty. We'll catch you next time. I hope you have found this video informative, entertaining, or interesting. Hopefully all of the above. And thank you, as always, to the lovely, kind, and generous Patreon supporters floating up above there. I know several of you really dig the photography stuff, so I hope you enjoy this one in particular.